Well, good morning. I am back out here doing another camera pull, and gonna do things a little. Let me clean you off there a little bit. I'm gonna do things a little bit different this morning. I'm out on a camera pull / scouting trip. I think today is April 30th, 31st. I've been wanting to scout this little bitty, what seems to be a thicket. Kind of unique. I already found a big blackberry patch, so it's pretty cool so far. I don't know if this is going to amount to anything, but it is a very unique food source right there. But first thing we're gonna do is, before I came out here last night, I sat down. I've been super busy lately, but I sat down, mapped out my trip for the day. I was doing some little scouting, and I was sitting there thinking, you know, I'm sitting here, might as well bring you guys in, show you how I sort of outline a map before I go. I'm the kind of person who tends to analyze everything, second guess everything, so I had to come up with a system to keep my head on straight and to give me something to go by and give me a starting point. So I'm gonna share with you how I do that today. So I'm gonna take you guys back to the computer last night and share with you kind of how I map things out before I go scout a location, and really how I just make it sort of a numbers percentage game. I don't go off of my own mind because I'll drive myself nuts. How I map out, identify points, and I go from there, and then I branch out. So we'll hop back over to the computer. I'll take you back over there, and I'm gonna keep going today, and hopefully I can find something decent where I can share today's trip with you too. So appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you at the end. I'm very much an overthinker. So if you're like that, it works to have a plan, hit the locations you want to hit, get it in your head, and first of all, map it out before you go. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And I appreciate you so very much stopping by and checking out the channel. And if you enjoy this video, at the end, just hit that little subscribe and drop the hammer on that like button and leave a comment. Check it out. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. We could talk about maps all day long, but I've been talking to some folks online, some of y'all out there, about map scouting. But really, this is kind of me before I go to a location. And you know, listen, I'm nobody, but I can tell you some of the stuff that I do has helped. The things that I'm going to talk about have helped me improve, other than just going out and diving into an area. And I really had to simplify it. I had to take my mind away from it and have some rules of thumb that I go by. So that's really what I try to do. I take myself out of it until I need to get out there, and then I kind of let my intuition or my gut feeling take over. But before I get out there, I try to have a system. So I just wanted to talk to you guys quickly about that system. And so I'm going to bring you guys into the map, and we're just going to talk about how this kind of works. And maybe you pick something up from it, and then we'll go from there. So come on into the map, and we'll get into it. So what we're looking at here, this is a totally random spot and location in East Texas, but I thought it was a good representation on some things. I mean, this is typical ground. This is actually better ground than what I typically hunt, being a lot of national forest and just a lot of general timberland. This seems to be private, but it's a large piece. That's kind of why I chose it. So first of all, what I do is I have a system that I go by when I mark up what I call it a location. So the things that we're going to mark up that I like to look for, it's a system. I have it labeled in my phone so I don't ever forget to mark up one thing or the other, because I get caught up chasing one thing or the other. So we're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to talk about edge, elevation, wind, and water. Those are the 4 things. So if you can call it like the EU, the EEWW, or the wee, because you can do water, elevation, and wind and edge. So I kind of go by those, the wee factor and things like that. But you know, then there's like subcategories within that. We're talking about edge, we're talking about tree breaks, brush lines, debris piles, and there's another one that I'm not going to mention to you that, because I think it's going to kind of surprise you. We're talking about elevation, we're talking about draws, funnels, social hubs, pinches, and things that may indicate bedding. Then when you're talking about water, creeks, ponds, wetlands, specifically from a topo standpoint that you can't see. Again, social areas. Wind, you want to know the dominant wind for access, and specifically perpendicular access is what I try to set up my spots 90% of the time. So first of all, what I try to do is I try to mark the edges. And here's what I'm talking about. Simple, from the obvious edge all the way to the minor edges, the real soft edges. So we get here on the map, and I just dropped me a couple of pins here, but what I'm going to do
is I'm going to literally just start to mark the edges, and I also color coordinate everything. So any edges that I mark before I go out. Okay, a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we're going to get back on track here. I think my recording system does not like me to move around much. So this is an example of what I'm going to do. I like to free draw this most of the time, but I like to come in here and just mark this edge, and again I color coordinate this. I use yellow for areas that I'm going to mark, and then when I get out there I use white for the trails that I use. And I would zoom in a little bit. Let's see if it'll let us. Here we go. And I'm marking this pine thicket. This will also help you when you start doing this over and over. It'll help you really recognize, understand, and once you get out there, you get a little experience, you'll be able to understand what those treetops and everything mean. So I told you that I was going to surprise you with an edge that I always mark. And that is, I always count edge as the edge of a road. Always mark the roads. They always count. So what I'll do, and honestly, I go in and I'm talking about any subtle thing that you think might indicate an edge, like this one right here. There's a little cluster of trees. It kind of feeds back in there. I'm just going to tie that one together. Some of the more subtle things, so we'll bounce out here. So I do that, and then again, here's an example. And again, I don't want to draw this video out, but I will go mark this edge out here. And then here's another edge. I'll do the outside of this one. And then here's an edge right here. This is one area on, oh, we got some movement. This is one area. This is a very interesting edge right here that somebody may overlook. But check out this little strip. It's almost like a little feeder band of edge that comes in there. So we'll save that. But I think you get the idea. So from there, once I mark all the edges, and I'm talking about this one right here, we would outline this one where the cursor is. We would come over here, and I chose this one specifically for this clear cut. So I would outline this entire clear cut, outline this finger, and this low spot. Now one other thing is these clear cuts. See this right here? See this little open? This is a very thick area. The trees probably died off. But how I would mark this is very much an edge also. And I'm talking about just like this. I'm just going to follow it, and it kind of follows. And if you once you start following the topo, you kind of see that there's the ever so slightest, almost a little drain. There is the smallest little draw going up there. So I'm going to do that in all of those areas. I'm going to outline these fingers. So one of my rules of thumb, once I outline all of my edges, is anytime I get multiple edges touching, multiple edges within proximity, anything that comes together, works into another location, I draw a circle around it. Now, when I go through edges, and then I start doing elevation. And by that, I mean I'm looking at high points, draws, flat spots coming off of a hill. We don't get a lot of elevation. It's very subtle out here, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. Anything that would mean a change in hubs or social hub, and that you're talking about draws, funnels, we're looking for anything like that. A lot of the times when it comes to that, and I didn't see that until I zoomed out and I saw this over here. Now look at this. Here is two high points, almost like you would kind of create a saddle, but just creates a little draw. So then what I do is for draws and low areas, I do an area shape, and I do this in red. Again, I use the smallest of indications. So anywhere that there's a funnel, I go through the pinch and I go out of it just a little ways, and I save it like that. So I get these subtle shaded areas. Shaded areas to me indicate funnels, pinches, and anything like that. That's one way to mark elevation and things like that. Elevation, there's just so much that goes into it. Elevation can create many things. And for Onyx, for this purpose, I don't have to mark out the water. I do like to mark out low areas that may indicate water. And when I'm talking about wetlands, what I'll do is I'll go up to the topographic layer and I will kind of take 30,000 foot view, in any area that may be indicated lowlands by the map, I will shade that as well. So you'll see a bunch of little blue dots with little water plants and stuff like that on the topo feature, and I shade that because that can be super good areas as well. So going back to those draws, sometimes what I like to do is I like to indicate just a direction, sometimes because I'm a very visual person. So what I will do is I will come through and kind of put a direction just so I can see, or I will look at a hill and I will mark an elevation point, kind of mark it, and I'll create a little arrow, and that way when I'm looking at different things, I like to use those arrow indications to indicate a direction, things like that. And I will also indicate those draws, and I will zoom out and I'll do the same thing on all of these little draws. And you could just sit here forever, and I always kind of like to point a direction. And to me, whenever I give a direction, it just means uphill or downhill. And I will look at areas like that. So when you see these very subtle transitions start to stack up. So, and also when you do this, I like to focus on edges that they stick out into another monotonous sea of woods. So just like you're seeing right here, this little strip of hardwoods really comes out into this big pine stand. That's obviously more mature hardwoods. And that's also a low area. You can kind of shade that out if you want. And when you make those edges, obviously you would outline this one, and then you would outline this other pine stand, and you have anything that juts out right there. This one is obviously stands out too, and you also have a different type of edge right here, a different type of edge right here. You have a low draw. You have water right here. This probably has water in it too. So you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 things. You've got water, edge, 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 right here in this corner. So, and this is also one thing that I like to mark these waterways out in these draws, is you get areas like this, which will be what I would call a social area. It may not be the best place to set up when you're targeting early season, but we're talking about the rut, traveling these fingers and identifying these waterways in East Texas. And you know, anytime you have these monotonous, those waterways become even more important. Maybe not so much out west, but obviously they're still valuable, but maybe not as much as they would be at other times. The reason I outline the roads is because the roads, I count them I take them into account as a percentage. Those lines, when they come together, the road counts. So when anything touches the road, whether that be a low area, those roads are going to be excellent places for cameras, you know, overlook spots, things like that. Do not discount the roads and road crossings. And another thing I like to look at is I don't see a ton of really good examples on this map, but what I usually look for is when let me zoom out and I'll show you a little bit better example of what I'm talking about. So when you zoom out on a property, you also see there's a high point, there's a funnel through there. Here's a high point, could be a little bit of a funnel around this one, anything maybe between here and here. Looks like there's a little food plot right there. That's how you start putting the bigger picture together. So what I like to do when I'm looking for bedding points is to take that main elevation point and follow it around and see where they kind of stack up, and then maybe there's a space or a longer flat point, like maybe right here. You got some lines sort of stacked up, and right here there's a little bit of length. Actually, this whole spot, maybe even right here, it's also in thick cover. You know it is right next to that draw, so they could drop in this draw and just sort of move down that way. I would also come over here and see how these lines stack up, and then right here where you get more of a flat spot, but you're still looking downhill. I'm going to mark all of those locations, but then I'm also going to take the wind into account. So what I do at the very end is I come through and I usually make a very thick dominant wind line somewhere on my map. Could be in the upper corner, could be right here. I usually put it somewhere out of the way. So if my wind is out of the southeast most of the time, I will throw my little wind marker up here and I will kind of zoom out, and I'm going to take a look at all the points I made. Yeah, I know I'm running long here, but it's just so easy to get carried away. I'm going to take that dominant wind factor and I'm going to take those bedding spots that don't make sense. I'm going to discard them. I'm going to take the edges that set up best for those wind, those feeding areas, everything into account. So again, you're looking at edge, you're looking at anything that could be tree breaks, brush lines, debris piles in those clear cuts, roads. Mark them all out, and wherever the most points come together, basically put a target on that point and go scout it. Elevation, shade those draws, the funnels, any hubs, those social hubs, a pinch like between those two high points we talked about. Shade areas up that you might be bedding, so those spaced out lines on a higher elevation moving downhill that coincides with the dominant wind. Water, mark those creeks, ponds, drop a pin on those ponds, double check that topo layer for those wetland indications. Wind, mark the dominant wind, and then you can start planning your access, looking at those routes and calculating things like that. So before I ever set foot onto a place, just like I said, just to recap all of that, outline everything, get some points, get the highest probability locations, and go there first. If you find something else along the way, that's great, but this gives you a plan, tells you where all of the biggest diversity points are, where the most activity is likely to be in relation to maybe those social areas and how far they are apart. You start pulling the picture in, and it really makes it less intimidating once you get out there and you can look and you've already got this all marked up and you're good to go. So looks like we're running super long on this, so we could go on like this for days, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. It's already going to be a long video. If you got some ideas, you got some thoughts, drop it in the comments. Let me know some of the techniques that you guys use. I'm excited to get out there and do some scouting tomorrow. Hopefully it yields something good. I've had a couple of good ones lately, so I'm kind of due for a dud, so I'm not really sure, but thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of this. It wasn't too all over the place because I just get excited and it takes a long time to do all this. I don't want to take up too much time just marking everything out. Have a good week, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.